It's your mind that interacts with the world. And so, if you are able to improve the relationship with your mind, then you are improving the relationship with the world. Self inquiry is a contemplative practice of questioning one's identity beyond roles, perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. As we begin to question it in self inquiry, we experience ourselves as something separate from the thoughts, separate from the emotions. The more objective we become, the more free we are to choose our choices. You're doing it more from who you actually are. The point around objectivity is that whatever our intelligence is, it allows it to come forward and help us choose.